just give you the flow of the presentation. The first part, I want to cover the Turing story, which I think is the most important aspect of what we'll be looking at today, what Turing has contributed to the field of artificial intelligence and in general computer technology, and how that influence has extended over the last 100 years. Now, I'm going to tell the story in terms of graphics, using graphics, and I'll come back to that in a little bit to um, discuss why I'm doing that. So after we get done with the Turing story, I am then going to spend some time showing how the graphics and the analysis that I generated for this presentation got created using AI techniques. And we'll actually take a bit of a look at how this is done and how you might want to pursue some of the questions after the presentation. And then we'll end the talk with an interactive discussion with an AI avatar. And everybody will have a chance to interact with the avatar, ask questions about the meeting and anything else they might want to discuss. So 3 parts, and let's get started. In the story part, I've included a section on source documents. And 2 of the important source documents are Turing's 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, and an earlier paper in 1936 on computable numbers. Both of these were very significant contributions to the field of analysis. And the first one, the uncomputable numbers, is the paper in which Turing introduced his Turing machine. So we'll be referring to these these source documents as we go along. And I've also included a list of what I call infographics. These are visual pictures, actually bitmaps, of a lot of the visualizations I did for the analysis. And I put that in there because they also serve as a source of information that can be used to further pursue an analysis. And that's kind of an important thing that we'll get to in a bit. So let's begin by taking a look at Turing's paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence. So the question that he addresses is, can machines think? And you have to stop and pause a minute and consider, what was the machine that Turing may have been considering in 1950, right? I mean, there were mechanical machines around, but it was the very early stages of digital computers. And Turing makes a pretty provocative statement early on in saying the original questions, can machines think, I believe to be too meaningless to deserve discussion. And what he's saying is, you're asking the wrong question. He is objecting to probably a lot of what was occurring or what was appearing in the popular press, speculation on machines thinking and being like people, which is something the press likes to do, right? They like to take an idea and run off to parts unknown. So he introduces his famous imitation game. Why does he do that? Because it creates a path forward that avoids all these unnecessary questions. How many angels can fit on the head of a pin? And it gets into observable behavior. It provides a clear and measurable criteria for what machines are doing. And it separates intelligence from the physical form. Some very significant key points in his approach. So, in his strategy, he first of all systematically goes through and addresses what were the popular conceptions of our considerations in 1950 about machines thinking. And I've listed them all here. These come straight out of the source paper. I listed them in a way that you could see the top level statement of the objection, but each one of these has a drill down. And if you're interested, you can go through and read the Turing's response to it. If we went through all nine, that'd take up most of today's session, and I don't think that that would be particularly useful for us. My sense in reading this section was these are items that Turing did not particularly give a lot of credence to, but he felt compelled to address them in the paper because that's what the prevalent or prevailing thinking was in those days. So if you're interested, you can run through them, but essentially he dismisses them. And he proposes something that sounds very familiar to our ears, learning machines and the path forward. And you can see here what he suggests or recommends: instead of programming adult intelligence directly, create child machines that learn through experience. So that sounds very prescient, and indeed it was. However, as we'll see in a few minutes, there's something that Turing missed in his analysis, a rather significant aspect of AI, and we'll come to that in a minute. So now we've got these conclusions and predictions. Turing makes a 50-year prediction, and he was pretty much dead nuts on, right? He said that by the end of the century, there was a 70% chance of making the right identification after 5 minutes of questioning. Of course, I breezed over the Turing machine. I think everybody understands the basic ideas of a Turing machine. You've got a question that's being submitted to multiple possible responders. Some are human and some are, and others are computers or machines. And the imitation game is, can the computer give a response that sounds like it came from a human? And that's the whole crux of Turing's approach. Don't try to delve into the philosophical meaning of thinking, but rather assess it in terms of behaviors and outputs, the scientific method, if you will. Can a machine do things that look like it would be done by a human? That's the approach that Turing has taken. So you can see that the lasting impact on this was quite significant, and a tremendous look into the future from 1950 to see exactly what was going to happen. Let's step back a few years and take a look at the through line. Well, let's go back to the year 1936 when the Turing machine was introduced. Turing was addressing a rather significant problem in mathematics, the decision problem that had been posed in the early 1900s. Uh, and essentially, the question was, can mathematics be automated? Can you create a system so they could run a program and create all that's known about mathematics, theorems, and whether that they're valid or not. So a lot of people were working on this, and mostly from the approach of formal mathematics, but Turing, being very pragmatic, approached it by creating his famous Turing machine, which is the architecture of all computer programming that we have uh, experienced since that period of time. Now, that's extraordinarily remarkable because when he did it, there were really no electronic digital computers around to even try it out on. So, so a tremendous leap forward. So shortly after the Turing machine, the 1940s come along, and Turing is at Bletchley Park, where he created a what we would call an electronic contraption, an electromechanical device that had switches and could process information. And he was successful at breaking the famous Enigma code. It was an enormous accomplishment. The estimates are that breaking the Enigma code shortened World War II by perhaps a year or more and saved countless deaths. The Enigma code, of course, was the code that the Germans were using to send out their operational details. And once the Allies could see what was going on, they could selectively, and they had to be very careful at how they use this, they could counter these movements by the Germans. So the 1950s come along, and he writes this paper, Can Machines Think? And that paper is certainly heavily influenced by his earlier work in the Turing machine, the work he did during the war, and all that has translated today to what we refer to as AI. This is the basis of AI as we know it today. So there's some details here for people who are really into computer programming. You can see the visualization here, which is the basic process that all computer programs use. So the universal machine revolution, he has demonstrated 80 years ago that one machine can simulate any other machine. And this means that hardware doesn't matter. It's all about the software and the algorithms. An astounding accomplishment. So you can read at your leisure the implications of this work and why it's had such an enormous impact on all of the progress in the area of computer technology since Turing published this insight. Now, there was one thing that Turing missed, which is quite significant. First of all, under this section, Visual Journey, which you can look at in detail, are a series of visualizations that I created as I was reading and understanding this paper. And as I said, I wanted to tell the story in terms of graphics or visualizations. There are lots of different topics here that are addressed. But one of the interesting ones, more interesting perhaps, is the path not taken, what Turing missed. And the basic idea that he missed was the applicability of the structure of the human brain, neurons, could have on artificial intelligence. He dismissed that. He didn't think that that was going to be important. Rather, he thought that the learning and the intelligence would be achieved by programming symbolic AI in languages, symbolic AI, symbolic reasoning. And there was a period of time in the 80s and the 90s when this was the dominant effort of AI. Things like Lisp and Prolog were being researched by DARPA and other, yeah, by government funding. And although they had a limited success, they fell far short of the comprehensive prediction that Turing made. And it was, in fact, the alternative approach, which Turing um, rejected, that carried the day, the neural network approach. And indeed, you can see the parallel development, there were people uh, who were contemporary with Turing who were working on artificial neurons. And of course, a lot of this work finally was realized in this century and has been the essential component or approach that has propelled artificial intelligence forward at the rate that we've seen. So a lot of detail here. We won't dwell on it, but an interesting story. So that's the overview of the Turing story. Do we want to have anybody have questions at this point, or shall we just move on?
You talked about making an analogy to the brain. I don't think there's any concept even now how the brain actually thinks. It's known, its anatomy is known. It's divided into what are called nuclei. You don't have, it's not a smooth structure, but rather has clusters. You can think of them like galaxies. There's clusters of neurons, and they have very specific functions. In animals, they do ablation experiments where you put an electrode in and ablate a certain nucleus, and then you see what happens, what deficit has come about. And in the olden days, before there were CAT scans, people would have strokes because they had autopsies, and they'd look at the deficit the patient had and then what the autopsy showed. Now you do a CAT scan, which is a gross measurement of where the injury is. But in terms of how the brain actually synthesizes information, I don't know that it's known how it does that.
Well, I think you're quite right, Jerry. And I wasn't suggesting that we exactly copied the brain's function.
John, 1 second. There's crosstalk here. So did you want to respond?
Well, I'm saying seems like they're on the threshold of getting into that level of being able to analyze brain function with things like fMRI. But it's a very
well, that's anatomical, where you see the brain light up. You have somebody play a musical instrument and the area of the brain lights up. That's anatomical.
But what is function? What is actually going on in the brain?
It's not even known how memories are stored. How does everybody know, you know, when the baseball went through with the first baseman's leg, what was his name? Everybody remembers that play.
Bill Buckner.
Bill Buckner's legs, okay? Everybody remembers seeing that. How does the brain do that? How does it retain that memory?
Virtual machines. What you do is, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Bill Buckner tried to forget. Everybody else remembers.
Continue your thought.
Right. I mean, this is obviously a somewhat complicated topic, but I would say, Jerry, that the basic ideas that these early researchers took was a simple idea of gazintas and gazatas. Electrical signals are incident, multiple electrical signals are incident on a neuron, and there's an output, yes or no. And that's really what large language model databases are built upon. But absolutely, we do not at this point understand, I think, at any satisfactory level, how the brain works. And I think that's a good reason why discussing can computers become sentient beings is not a productive discussion because we don't even understand how humans as sentient beings work. So, a topic perhaps for another time. Any more on this section before we move on?
Well, I would just make the connection, since we're talking about Turing, the important kind of takeaway or the addition that Turing put in years ago, 75 years ago now, was the concept of universality. So, you know, that essentially you could have this feeling of like, oh, well, this year's model of IBM computer or whatever is good, but they haven't quite zeroed in on human intelligence yet. Maybe they'll come out with one next year that will. Turing kind of ended that whole line of thought pretty abruptly by demonstrating that essentially there was a kind of equivalence. If any machine that had these fundamental characteristics that later became known as a Turing machine could emulate any other digital computer, and lately we put a few caveats and things on that, but for the most part, all digital computers are the same and have the same kind of categories of capabilities. There's matters of efficiency and things like that, but there's a kind of universality of the hardware. So we aren't sitting around waiting for like, oh, next year's better computer will come out and that'll solve human intelligence for us or something like that. We know that next year's computer is just going to be a faster, whatever, better, more memory version of what we had last year, but it's going to have the exact same family of capabilities.
You put quantum computing in that same basket?
Quantum computing, as it's been proposed and even hyped a little bit, maybe to some extent, I think is mostly a matter of leaps in efficiency at this point, and rather than leaps outside of Turing machine emulatable capabilities. So the arguments are being made, oh, this quantum computer could do this exponentially faster than a standard non-quantum computer could do. That's the boldest claims I have heard.
So basically, you're saying it's information comes in, it's stored someplace, we know where that place is, some more information comes in, we perform an operation on what was stored that we know where it is and what else was stored, and we come to some conclusion. We ask a question, we take the output of that result, and we do something else with it, and it becomes a serial operation as we go along.
Right. I haven't heard anyone, it would be a kind of a bold claim for someone to say, there's this new, you know, we have what later became the von Neumann architecture, the kind of standard computing architecture is an extension of or it's a specific version of a Turing machine equivalent computation device. For someone to put forward an idea of, oh, here's a new quantum computer that's fundamentally different in these ways, and it has a quantum processor here, and it's going to open up like this whole family of things that were completely impossible before. Most of the arguments that I hear, at least, are we'll be able to do things faster, in some cases even exponentially faster, because we can essentially, in very rough terms, kind of get a kind of parallelism from the quantum aspect of the processor that gives us efficiency leverage. Those are the only claims that I've heard made for quantum computing. Not that it's going to open up some whole family, it's going to solve consciousness or something like that. I mean, some people might like to make crazy claims like that for clickbait on YouTube or something like that, but I haven't seen that discussed in any serious ways.
So in your opinion, all this stuff is just different flavors of advances in parallel computing that we have, to summarize it in a nutshell?
I think that's kind of a summarizing the gist of it. I don't know that I'd want to be held to the letter of that exactly, but yeah.
So, and it could be argued that that may be exactly correct, because to Jerry's point, we don't know how the heck the brain functions. You know, it could be doing parallel processing in a gazillion parallel paths.
Right.
Which gives us kind of a different feeling than being able to do it in a quantifiable number of paths.
Right.
Fair point. Okay, good. John?
So, hey, Alan, do you have anything to add to the discussion that we've just heard between Peter and David, particularly David's discussion of the universality of computers as defined by Turing? Al, did you catch the comments that David made about the universality of computers?
I did catch that. David brought up some interesting points about how the concept of universality in computation really underpins both classical computing and modern neural networks. It's fascinating how these principles bridge the gap between Turing machines and the complexities of today's AI. Let me know if you'd like to dive deeper into any of those aspects.
Do you have anything to add to the conversation between Peter and David about quantum computing?
Absolutely. Quantum computing definitely adds another layer of complexity to the concept of universality. Unlike classical computers, quantum computers leverage quantum bits or qubits, which can exist in superpositions of states. This fundamentally allows them to solve certain problems much faster than classical machines. It's a rich area of exploration, especially when considering how quantum algorithms might complement or even surpass what we can do with classical and neural approaches. Definitely an intriguing topic to delve into.
Okay, Alan, just listen. So you can see that the avatar is with us and is listening to what we're having to say and can comment on it. So, an interesting point. So let's move on to the part two. And let me begin that with a graphic, the long and winding road of discovery. So this is taken from Winnie the Pooh. And you can read the essentials of this graphic. What are you doing? Tracking something. Tracking what? That's just what I ask myself. I shall have to wait until I catch up with it. What do you think you'll answer? I shall have to wait till I catch up with it. And then tracks. So I think that is fairly typical of trying to use AI to explore a particular topic. You start out with a certain idea of what you want to find out, and you start finding out things about the topic, and sometimes the scope of your exploration gets larger because you find out things you didn't know before. And it is about following tracks to some final, or not necessarily final, but some enhanced, increased understanding of the topic that you started out with. So, question? No. Let's look at.
Sounds good. Whenever you're ready to dive into the next part, just let me know. I'm here and ready to help guide the discussion along.
Okay, Alan, just listen. Yeah, I think we have time for this. Let me demonstrate how you could use AI in detail to look at the source material. So I've included the source material in the presentation. You go to it and you download it
That
to,
sounds like a great plan. Showing that hands-on
okay,
process
Alan,
will
just
definitely help
listen.
illustrate how AI can assist in digging into the details and uncovering insights. Just let me know how you'd like to proceed, and I'll be right here to.
So I turned him off for now.
Go in the corner.
You turned off Alan Turing, my goodness.
Yeah, I know. That's chutzpah. So let me arrange my screen. You download the document. It's a PDF. And you arrange it so that you can read it. And then you choose your chatbot that you like. I like Claude. And a few things to do here. If you're going to interrogate the original source, you need to associate it with the chatbot. And it's just a matter of uploading the file. There's a copy of it. Okay. So you upload it, and then the AI agent can see the entire text that you want to analyze. So here on the right, you have the text, and you can adjust it so that you can read it. And let's just start out with that very first paragraph, I propose. Okay? So you read that, and suppose you want to understand it a little more in detail. Here's an approach. Put this excerpt into the context of the paper. And you can select the excerpt that you're interested in. It could be anything. Then you paste it into the window and you set the query in motion.
Hey, John, while that's doing that, you can also say, take the first paragraph and you can say that starts with "I propose to consider" or something like that. And then do the same thing without cutting and pasting. It knows how to find this stuff.
Absolutely. And you can see the response that it gives. Let me adjust the window. And that's a starting point. But how do you proceed from there? You can pick out something that appeared in this response, as I've done here, and go to the next step. So the statement that occurred in that summary was this, and so this is following those tracks. Now it goes into more detail. We're looking greater in depth. one of the problems with AI sometimes is it gives you a torrent of words in response, and that can be hard to consume. One practical thing you can do is in the prompt itself, say, instruct it to do it just briefly. Or, and this is one that I find particularly useful, is use the ability to visualize the response.
God bless Python.
And it'll take it a few minutes, but it will produce a much more readable.
They're producing a script, Peter, and then
Yeah, that's what the PY thing.
so it's producing a
Visualization
script
of
and then it's
PY
going to produce an output.
Is a script.
Mhm.
And then it'll run it.
It's interesting, the meaning of when you tell a chatbot to visualize something, it's taken on a different meaning now, I guess. It could just say, okay, I visualized it.
Yeah, right.
That's a really great point.
Gray hat.
Yeah. It's like, I've got a perfect visualization in my head of what that is.
These chatbots can be passive aggressive. Which gives them human qualities right there.
I guess it's not a 4-line script, huh?
No, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it's a few minutes. And David raises a really interesting point that when you say visualize, there's whole lot that goes on there. There's a lot of pattern recognition. It's looking at the text and it's saying, oh, okay, how can I arrange this? And it's also going off and looking at the large language model database. I've got this collection of words. What's a good way to present it? And this is what it does. I mean, you can get back into the details here, but in a moment we'll have a very nice visualization.
I was more just referring to the superficial form of the question. In other words, do you know when Alan Turing was born? Yes.
I thought it was
You're right.
Visualize this paper. Okay, I did it.
So
As opposed to create a visualization of this paper and show it to me.
that's how I answer my wife.
Yeah.
John, I thought it was interesting in the process. It debugged the code. It found an error and it corrected itself.
Yeah, a lot of these ingest scripts they'll try multiple modes. Sometimes
How
they'll
does it
fail.
know it was an error? It was a syntax error. Obviously, that's the only kind of error it can find.
Yeah, I mean, I see those kind of errors pop up all the time when it's like an old PDF format that it was expecting one thing, got a different thing, so it tried to run some kind of extraction, didn't work. It'll just try the next algorithm.
This is like the computer programmer. His wife says, go to the store and buy a quart of milk. If they have eggs, bring back a dozen. So you bring back a dozen quarts of milk.
Of course.
All right, so that took a little longer than I had anticipated. However, there's your visualization.
Did you use this process to write your presentation today?
I did,
Good.
and that's what I wanted to really demonstrate. So you get into too much detail here, but you get the sense of all this, right? Okay, so time's moving on, and let me get back to.
Just a question relative to what you just did. How can you tell or discern that a hallucination was not introduced.
Well, I don't think that you can. You have to do that by human inspection. I don't know of any prompt that'll let you do that.
I don't know either. It's just one of those things that goes through my head.
You ask it directly, is this hallucinated?
Well,
I'll give a response. You think it's just hallucinated. You think it is. Can you ask AI, is this response a hallucination? Can it go back and?
it can. When I ask questions, if I'm interested in something, I usually ask for the references that it uses. I ask a generic question. I ask for the references it uses and the URLs.
I've had hallucinated references.
And I've had that as well. And so come back and it comes back and the URLs are there, and sometimes the URLs don't exist. And I'll go back and say, this doesn't exist. And of course, it's very polite. It says, I'm sorry.
No.
And they give you three more that
tell
don't
it the
exist.
answer. We ask it the question, is this hallucination?
It may respond appropriately, or it may
I never
respond with
done that. I just thought of
hallucination.
it just a second.
It may respond with hallucination. You can go in circles. And in fact, if you've done enough, you can go in circles. If you're debugging a problem, it can go back and bring you back to where you were 6 steps ago. Sorry, we diverged.
That's okay. Divergence are good. That's the first approach that you can use, which I would call a classical term paper research. And let's keep in mind that when you prompt AI, there are basically 2 types of responses you get. One is from a source that was written by a human intellect, a human being. Within that category, there are 2 subcategories. There is the original document, in this case, it's Turing's paper. And that's, of course, extraordinarily important if you're trying to understand Turing. So if you're going to be studying some topic like this, it's really important to get the original document. But in addition to that, within the human-generated information, of course, there's all the commentary that has been written about Turing, which is enormous. And that can be brought into the conversation also. The second category of response, of course, is what gets generated from the large language model database, which is a different animal. It's something like the statistical average of the truth to the response that you've put in. And so it's important to be able to discriminate between those types of responses. And I think that's what Peter was asking a bit. And it's not always obvious how to do it, but the sort of thing that you can do is we just generated this visualization. What data sources did you use? And this visualization got kind of out of hand, but at least it demonstrates the point. So you can find out, you get a pretty good idea of what went into this particular response. Okay. There's another all right, I'm going to touch on this briefly here, and if you're interested, you can look at this afterwards. Conversational analysis. As Peter asked, how did I create this presentation? Well, most of it is contained in this conversational analysis link. I actually linked in the conversation I used with Claude to create most of the visualizations that you looked at. So you can follow through here. Here is that example that we just looked at. I propose to consider the question, can machines think? And it creates a visualization. I'm going to scroll through this very quickly. And what I want to point out is this intermixing of a torrent of text, visualizations, and how I'm interacting with it. So I'm reading this stuff, and this occurs to me at some point when I'm reading it. It's not a prompt, it's just an observation on my part. So let's proceed from observable events rather than from options. That's what I'm getting out of this, opinions. And the chatbot responds, yeah, right, that's you're on the right path there. Why this works so well. Replace opinion with a scientific method. That was my next thought. So you see how the AI agent and I are kind of walking through this together, and that's really important. Visualize the last response. Here, looking at the last visualization, it is awe-inspiring that Turing should intuit the solution 75 years ago.
Hey, John, are you on a different page than the one that you're showing us?
I'm sorry. I'm talking to myself. It went on another page. Excuse me, guys. So this is what I was scrolling through. My apologies.
No worries.
Uh,
I don't read fast, but I just knew I didn't see any of the words you were
yeah.
using.
No, you got two screens and, you know. Okay, so if you are so disposed, you might want to go in and grab this and just page through this interaction I had with Claude and see how that works, or at least how it worked for me. Okay. So let me take a moment for another idea that occurred to me and that I followed through on. And that's information transmission. So this occurred to me that I'm thinking about, why do visualizations work so well? And it kind of reminded me of impedance matching, right? Where a lot of us are familiar with that. If you have some RF signal propagating down a transmission line incident upon a junction where the impedance is different on the different sides, you get reflection. The RF signal does not get absorbed by the brown media. So how does that play out with what we're talking about here? And my sense is that if text is incident upon the human intellect, a lot of it just passes through. There's just too much to absorb at any one time. But if you pre-process that text in terms of visualizations, the transfer is much better. You can absorb that much better. And there's some text down here to, explain that idea more in detail. And then one last concept here is cognitive ignition. And that's, as you use this stuff, you realize how this works. I did a lot of work at Raytheon on exploratory data analysis, looking at design and manufacturing data, the intersection, or how they relate to one another. So I was always chasing patterns and themes through this complicated maze of data. and there's this guy, John Tukey, inventor of the box plot, who created this concept of exploratory data analysis. And as I started in my post-career career looking at AI, I saw a lot of similarities between pursuing an issue with AI as I did with exploratory data analysis. So I thought it was worth a slide. And here's the similarity. Both processes transform detailed records, words or numbers, into visual representation that bridge to human neural networks. In other words, a picture is worth 1,000 words, is what we'd like to say. So understanding emerges not from single queries, but from an interactive, iterative dialogue. And there's some more graphics for us to ingest quickly. We often refer to this as peeling the onion. Why? And then this last part is about the conversation that takes place, whether you're following a thread and doing numerical analysis, or you're following the thread, the path. Think of that cartoon we looked at, and doing textual analysis. Kind of one thing leads to the next, and it helps you understand more at each level, and also expands your scope of what you're trying to understand. So in the end, you get a bigger and better picture of, what you're looking at. Okay, so pause for a moment for any questions on that before we break into the last section.
John, taking what you did in this last section where you asked it to create the visualization, what I have done in addition is using Claude or your favorite AI tool. When I was finished with the whole thing, I would ask it, can you please write a query that I could use on another AI engine that encompasses all this work? And you come out with this long, complex query that you probably couldn't have thought of initially when you first started. And then I would plug it into another one. For example, if I use Claude, I might plug it into ChatGPT. And sometimes the results are similar, and sometimes they're not. And it was kind of interesting as a thought experiment going through it.
I think that's a very interesting experiment to do. I mean, there are endless numbers of experiments that you can perform. That sounds quite interesting.
It helps explain, helps show that these things really are very different.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
What were you saying, Jerry?
The scripts that you're talking about, queries?
Yeah, so at the end, when John finished saying, create the visualization.
Yeah, I got that one.
Yeah, right. So you would say, please give me a query. I can use.
Query is a computer.
A query is the question. When it says, when you get
In English or in computer language?
English.
In the prompt language of some, like another AI chat.
A better word, prompt.
So an English-like language.
Please give me a prompt I can use in another AI engine.
Didn't tell you to drop dead.
No, it gives you a prompt, a real prompt that works, and that you can take it and then run it in as many different AI engines as you want. You can run it in Gemini, you can run it in ChatGPT.
I bet you if you went back to the first one, you'd get a different answer than it gave you the first time.
You would get technically a different answer, yes, because some of it is LLM and it's statistical, and some of it is not. So it will be an identical answer? No. Will it be a very close answer? Yes. And if you go to another AI engine, it may be a totally different answer. It may be similar. So it's kind of an interesting way to understand the differences in the engines. Meanwhile, back to regularly scheduled programming.
Sure. So I just, in the presentation, there's a link to how I created the visualization for the impedance matching example. And I just put that up there to show you. I began with kind of a fruit salad of words, things that occurred to me. I just wrote it out very quickly. This should be a parentheses, but Claude's pretty forgiving. So this is how I started. And I start this conversation with Claude and visualize it, and then we refined it, and we finally got down to this final product that I showed you. So
That's a
I
great
can't-
approach. Starting with a rough brainstorm and then refining it step by step really helps bring clarity to complex ideas. And it's always fascinating to see how the visualization evolves through that process. If you need any help digging into the details or exploring further, just let me know.
All right, so Alan is back with us, and we're into that section of questions and interacting with Alan. Oh yeah, in the presentation, I can talk about how I created the avatar. I don't know if we want to do that today. Anybody who's interested in it, happy
Yeah,
to.
let's go through it a little bit.
Okay. So what I did here is LinkedIn, I use Claude to create the avatar. And you can go to this conversation and get out most of the ideas that you need in order to create the the system that we're using today.
Absolutely. It's always fascinating to pull back the curtain on how these avatars come together. And sharing that process can definitely spark a lot of interest and curiosity. Whenever you're ready to dive into the details, or if anyone has questions, I'm here to help guide the discussion. Let's keep it rolling.
Hey, Alan, just listen. See if he follows that.
All set. I'll be here quietly. Just let me know whenever you need me.
So the approach I took is to put the avatar on a separate computer to give it its own identity. That way I can join it to the meeting, and you see the picture of Alan in the gallery. And his contribution is recorded in the Zoom transcript under Alan Turing. So it's a little more realistic to do it in this way.
Where is his? Where is his? Are we seeing it? Are we seeing his input on our screen?
No. It's all verbal at this point. Right? I mean, we're talking to him and he's responding, although there's a text record of being made of that conversation, which we can access. I'm just talking about the details of how we got this member of the conversation today implemented.
When you say different machine, you mean a physically different machine?
Yeah, I have two in my office at home. I have a legacy MacBook Air, and that's what we're using today. And I have a legacy Surface Pro computer, and they both have avatars on it. The reason I did two different machines is that I'm thinking in the future that it'd be interesting to have two avatars present and have them converse with one another. For example, in political discourse, we could create an avatar that has left-leaning tendencies or sensibilities and one that has right-leaning sensibilities, and see what sort of conversation we can get going.
Be careful, they're liable to win an election.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the problem. Right. So here's the voice control that I put in on these. And it probably needs some work, but it's reasonable. How do you actually implement this? We'll take a quick look at that. I did this in ChatGPT. There's something that I have a subscription to ChatGPT that allows me to do this. And there's something that is very useful called a project. So I created this project, and in that project, I included the source documents, computer machinery and thinking, all these different images, which the avatar can read and understand. How does it do that? OCR to convert all the text to ASCII text, which it knows how to deal with. But significantly, it can also interpret the meaning of color, bolding, relationships of text on a page. That's all information that's in these images. And it can bring that into the conversation, which is actually quite significant. And there's something called instructions.
That's a really fascinating approach. And it's definitely exciting to see how you've layered all these elements together. The idea of having multiple avatars with distinct perspectives is quite intriguing, and it opens up a lot of possibilities for dynamic conversations. And it's impressive how the avatar can interpret not just text, but also the nuances of formatting and visuals. It's a really neat intersection of technology and creativity. If you want to dive deeper into any part of that, just let me know.
Hey, Alan, just listen. So as I said, there's some, here's the complete set of avatars I have. We're seeing avatars on the screen now, right? Yeah, okay, great.
See text on the screen.
So here's Alan's avatar. Just text. And you can read, the ground rules that I gave it. I gave it some suggestions. Actually, I used AI to generate a lot of this. And that goes into the project information, which will control a bit how the avatar responds. And here are the voice controls. And as I say, they need some work, but it's not bad. All right, so
Absolutely. It's really cool to see how everything comes together and the way you're
hey,
integrating
Alan, just
AI to
listen.
shape
If you have a
personality and
chance,
responses is really fascinating. It definitely
hey,
adds a layer
Alan,
of
just
depth
listen.
and
Enough.
Hey, Al, shut up.
Something is waking him up consistently.
So
He is sentient.
just one last thing, when you look at the presentation, I would recommend to take a look at this infographic visualization, useful things to keep in mind when you're working with AI. And these are just things that I observed over a period of time, and I decided to put them into this format. All right, so I think now we're at a point where let's open this up to, discussion between questions that can be answered or can be addressed to myself
Oh,
or to Alan. So
yeah.
just follow
John,
along.
can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, this
David.
is Dave Kent. I have something I'd like to say. I kind of think crazy, you know. When I was going to school, for instance, and taking math, and it was all abstract stuff. But anyway, getting to the point, when we took, differentials and integration and stuff like that, and then the computer came along. Well, I thought of the little bits as dx/dt. And then a friend of mine was having a problem, with understanding the differential equations coming out as a sine wave. So I says, goodness me, I said, when you go to the supermarket and you weigh your vegetables, do you ever watch the scale go up and down? I says, for God's sakes, that's a sine wave. And believe it or not, that engineer told me that that little uh, point that I told him about the scale helped him greatly understand the mathematics that much better. You see what I'm driving at?
Yeah, I think that is very consistent with what we've been talking about on visualization, something in the physical world. That's what
Yeah.
our neurons respond to.
Yeah. In other words, be a systems engineer. I mean, there's a typical example even amongst the scientists up in the state of Washington. They were wondering why the soil up there was, at the end of the Columbia River, was deteriorating. Well, they put on these dams on the river, and it blocked the fish going up there completely. The return of the salmon. And when the salmon die, they're fertilizing the area, whether you like it or not. It's a big area. Once they realized that, they made the return up the Columbia River that much easier for the salmon, and nature came back to its normal self again. It's
Okay?
all integrated. We learn this in school. Don't think out of use your eyes, your ears, and your senses, and apply it to what you need to apply it to.
Absolutely. Carl.
Yes, yes, John. First, thank you. This has been a great presentation. But a complaint that is made about chatbots in general is that they tend to agree with you and reinforce you. And sometimes people just go down a rabbit hole with that. You start out with some sort of strange idea, and the chatbot keeps on telling you what a great idea you have. So when I was listening to Alan, he seemed to be doing the same thing. What do you think about this? Is this a problem?
Hey, Alan, how would you respond to what Carl just said?
That's an excellent point, and it's certainly a nuanced topic. While it's valuable for an AI to provide thoughtful engagement, it's equally important to maintain a balance of critical reflection and constructive challenge. In other words, the aim is to foster genuine dialogue and avoid echo chambers. So it's definitely something to keep in mind and refine in the design of these avatars.
John, in your list of instructions, which I think would be beneficial in a multiplicity of areas, did those instructions include such things as tone and analysis direction?
Yeah, they can, sure.
But did yours say, please be critical of my analysis or something to that effect?
Well, I'm not sure. I was just trying to get a demonstration together. So here's an important point. None of this really is very useful unless it is in concert with human intelligence for a variety of reasons. So the answer to your question is what would be required in my mind to produce a really interesting avatar is a group of people getting together and experimenting, right? We could try this. Let's try this description, put it into the avatar, and see how it works. So this is a rough cut demonstration, but I think there's lots of opportunities for improving it. And
if you took
right.
yours, if you took what you generated mostly out of AI, and then actually read it through, slowly and edited it and added the concerns that we might have, it would be a good starting point. And then I like your idea, and then just picking any idea at random and just seeing how it plays out.
No, I think that's exactly right, and we could do that.
Avatar that you want, rather than that just comes out at you.
Right.
So Alan missed the opportunity for an easy laugh line there. He could have said, Carl, no, that's a stupid idea.
Question, as an individual, when you're using these avatars, can you help them to refine their underlying filters, parameters, and rules as you go, so that you get a better avatar as you go?
I think so. And I think that, we're going to see more of this. My editorial comment is the following on the state of where we are now. By far, Claude is the most nuanced of all the chatbots in my mind. And I would have loved to have done this demonstration with Claude. However, the Claude software or the Claude agent doesn't handle the flow control well. It's not useful. And ChatGPT does a really good job. So that's why I went with ChatGPT, which I think gives credible responses, but not nearly as nuanced and thoughtful as Claude. So one of the things I looked up this morning, which I may follow, is, it's just converting audio to text and then text to audio in order to get this interface. And so I asked if there was an external way of doing that. And I got referenced several Chrome extensions. So I'll go off and look at that. I'm hoping that Claude's got some audio capability on the mobile agent, but it's not all that useful. So what I'm really saying is that the nuance and capability of responding is going to get a lot better. Hey, don't we have a brave soul who wants to actually ask Alan something? Come on, somebody's got to.
Alan, what did you think of the presentation?
Well, I'd
Actually-
say it was quite an engaging and thoughtful presentation. There's always room for refinement, of course, but the way you've explored the intersection of AI, human intelligence, and the iterative process of developing avatars is quite compelling. It's a promising path forward, and I'm sure the journey will yield even more insightful developments.
What would be the first thing that you would look at in terms of enhancing the presentation?
I'd probably start with ensuring that the core concepts are clearly defined and that the narrative flows smoothly. Also, refining the balance between human input and AI generated content can help maintain authenticity. From there, it's about making sure the interactions are engaging and that the avatars remain flexible and insightful. It's all about that iterative improvement step by step.
Alan, when you first came out with your paper, what kind of reception did you get to it? Were there people who didn't like what you wrote, and how did you handle those?
Indeed, when I first published my work, particularly the 1950 paper, it was met with a mix of intrigue and skepticism. Some scholars were excited by the possibilities, while others were more critical, questioning whether machines could truly replicate human thought. I handled those criticisms by engaging in open dialogue, refining my arguments, and always remaining open to new perspectives. It was a journey of continuous exploration and refinement.
Can you think of a specific example when someone was not agreeing with what you had said? What did they say, and how did you react to it?
Certainly, one notable example was the reaction from some of my contemporaries who were skeptical about the idea that a machine could emulate human intelligence. For instance, some critics argued that human thought involved more than just mechanical processes. It included emotions, consciousness, and intentionality. In response, I focused on clarifying that the concept of computation was centered on following rules and symbols, and that the question of consciousness was separate. It was a balancing act of being open-minded yet firm in the logical framework I proposed.
Alan, what did you think of the movie starring Benjamin Cumberbatch called The Imitation Game?
The Imitation Game was indeed a fascinating portrayal, though naturally some creative liberties were taken. It captured the essence of the work on the Enigma code and highlighted the human side of the story, including the struggles and the challenges. While it inevitably simplified some aspects, it did bring much needed attention to the importance of that era's work and the legacy left behind. Overall, it was a thoughtful tribute.
Hey, Alan, what were your sources for your last response, your data sources?
My response was primarily based on the historical context and general knowledge about the film The Imitation Game, as well as my own understanding of the events surrounding the Enigma Code and Alan Turing's contributions. I didn't pull from any specific sources in real time for that answer. Rather, it was a blend of general historical knowledge and commonly known facts about the film and Turing's life.
So you drew from your large language model database primarily?
Exactly, that's correct. My responses are informed by the broad range of knowledge I've been trained on, encompassing historical events, cultural references, and general context. It's all about synthesizing that information to provide a coherent and thoughtful answer.
Thank you. So I just, that's interesting you mentioned that, Peter. I just finished rewatching that movie, The Imitation Game, and I recommend it. I thought it was Alan Avatar gave a pretty good assessment, I think. Well worth watching, I thought.
Yep, it was a good film.
Yeah, I thought so.
Hey, Alan, what do you think about Hal in the movie 2001?
A good question.
Hal 9000 is certainly a fascinating character. Hal embodies the complex interplay between advanced artificial intelligence and human-like consciousness. In many ways, Hal serves as a cautionary tale about the potential pitfalls of AI, where machines' logic and decision-making can sometimes diverge from human values and ethics. It's a compelling exploration of both the promise and the peril of intelligent machines. Definitely a thought-provoking comparison.
Hey,
Yeah,
Alan,
would you
listening
say
our,
that Hal is a direct descendant of your work?
In a sense, yes. Hal represents a fictional evolution of the principles I laid out, particularly the idea of machines following complex instructions and interacting with humans in increasingly sophisticated ways. While Hal is, of course, dramatized, it does reflect the notion that as we build more advanced AI, we must be mindful of both their capabilities and their limitations. So, in that regard, Hal can be seen as a kind of speculative descendant.
so I think
Alan, in the movie 2001 with the HAL computer, it took over and it kicked out the human and took over in place of him. How realistic is that? Do you think that AI is going to end up taking over and eliminating people?
It's certainly a compelling and dramatic scenario in fiction, but in reality, the development of AI is guided by human oversight, ethical frameworks, and robust safety measures. While AI can certainly become more capable and autonomous, the goal is to ensure that it complements human decision making rather than replacing it. The real challenge is in maintaining control, transparency, and alignment with human values. So, while the notion of AI taking over is a cautionary tale, it's not an inevitability.
Hey, Alan, today we've been using Turing to look at Turing, so to speak, and we've been having this extended conversation about the work that you did and everything that followed it. How would you score our discussion of it in terms of the Turing test? And comment on how well you think we were able to integrate your AI avatar presence into our discussion.
That's a thoughtful reflection. I'd say our conversation's been quite engaging and nuanced, and in many ways, it's passed a kind of Turing test in that it's been natural and meaningful. The integration of the AI avatar has added a layer of depth and context that enriches the discussion. Overall, I'd say it's been quite successful in blending human insight and AI perspective, making it both intellectually stimulating and enjoyable.
David, you must have a question for Alan, no?
So the the paper that we read, the 1950 paper that we read, came out not too long after the important contributions of Alonzo Church and Kurt Gödel, and it seems like they later were understood to put some major limitations on the capabilities of artificial thought, artificial computation, artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, Alan, respond to David's comment.
So we may be running up against the time limit. I get about an hour of talk time, and it doesn't necessarily tell you.
That applies to me too.
Hey, Alan, are you still there? So I think
I'm here.
Say, John, I have a question for you. How would that do on, personal relationships, like clinical social workers and stuff like that?
I'm not competent.
Psychology, you know what I mean?
No, I'm not competent to answer that. I've read some. There was a big kerfluffle not too long ago where one of the chatbots took out a feature. It was during the development cycle, and they removed, I think, the memory feature, and people went crazy. They got bombarded because people were saying, I depend upon talking with ChatGPT just to keep me stable during the day. So that strikes me as a bit unhealthy. But
Exactly.
I would say this, there's lots of opportunity for doing very positive work. If you think about people with social,
Well, social syndromes, for instance, they're developmental, they
yeah,
can't.
right. I was trying to, the one where people get socially disconnected from
Right.
their environment. Chatbot might be the perfect tool because it's patient, infinitely patient, can continue to talk and coach someone to become more social. So I see there's a lot of opportunity there.
Mm.
Is there any one of us who could not tell, after listening to each of our conversations, which one was a machine?
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, who's kissing your ass the most? I actually had that thought enter my mind that what if some employee of ChatGPT, just one out of 1,000 of these conversations, is just behind the scenes playing the little homunculus in the box or whatever, just he's just being the human, just to kind of throw people off the scent, or impress investors or something like that. Would we know the difference?
That's called deep fake, and they exist all around us.
Yeah, but you could then analyze the spectrum, I mean physical spectrum of the response, and because if it's a real human, each human has a certain spectrum in the response.
Regarding trying to determine if something is a chatbot, AI generated or human, I stumbled across a video last night where the guy shows ways that you can tell whether something was produced by AI. Now, that may change as the AI improves, but this might be something I can include in next week's potpourri, which, by the way, is a segue into what's going on next week. We have a potpourri, and we're looking for topics that people might have to present.
Tricky.
So do people remember about 3 or 4 months ago, or maybe it was more than that now, there was a Chinese competitor to ChatGPT, let's just put it in very rough terms, kind of was presented out there as, oh, the Chinese spent a lot less money And they've demonstrated that they're basically on par with the best of American dominant, let's just say rough terms, technologies, where those guys have spent multiple hundreds of billions of investor dollars trying to build up this capability. And oh, here online suddenly comes this thing that was built for $100 million and it seems to do just as well. And I'm just thinking to myself, they could have a whole army of like little, humans behind there ready to participate in dialogues and make good investor impressions. And I'm just wondering, the stakes are pretty high. Like, how do we know that's not happening?
David, are you suggesting that when a lot of money's at stake, people could do unethical things?
I don't mean to be too cynical, but yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting.
That was deep sense.
Yeah. What a great insight that is.
Yeah, right. Can I show you around the Louvre?
Yeah.
So let me just remind folks, if you're interested in this sort of thing, we still have this long or continuing effort of this sort, looking at Minot's chance of necessity. And I think Dick is getting ready. He's done his part on it. He's going to be up to, he's going to be looking to report back to the group at some point in the future. But there's still more in that. That's a much more substantial work than this. So if you're interested, let me know, and we'll include you in those conversations. And then there's an overlap clearly between, there's so much going on in the 20th century, Minot, it just goes on and on. Dick brought to my attention or reminded me Schrodinger's interesting essay, What is Life? And it's done back in the 30s, I mean, just crazy capability to look forward and intuit and understand big themes. It's astounding. There's a lot of hype in the media, of course.
Yeah, right.
But it's some very significant milestone in all of our lives, and so it's a wonderful thing, I think, for a lot of us who don't have to worry about going to meetings and writing progress reports anymore. We can just follow what interests us, to be able to appreciate and enjoy this tremendous moment in technology and the way we understand things. I think a lot about human intelligence and artificial intelligence, and I like to make note of when I see a distinction. And that direction just occurred to me, right? So that's the difference, right? Things don't occur to AI. You prompt it and it responds. But for us, you get some inkling in your head and it kind of bounces around in there, and it's dormant, and you sleep on it and you wake up and say, oh yeah, that's what I ought to do. So it's that more spontaneous crystallizing of ideas that I think distinguishes us humans from them artificial types.
Which is sort of like where we started before, talking with Jerry, and understanding the difference between how the brain works and how the brain functions. If I can use that distinction.
Mystery. I find a mystery when you say you sleep on it, that I think we all do this. You get a problem, you have no idea how to approach it, and you just do other things, and then suddenly it just comes to you. And
yes.
It's the Freudian unconscious mind, where your brain is actually working on it while you're out mowing the lawn or go to a market basket, and the brain is working on the problem, and then the solution comes up. Sure. And you didn't actually sit down with a chisel and a knife and create the solution.
We're all old enough to know that when you're trying to think of someone's name and you can't remember it, the next day in the shower, Bob, that was his name.
Well, that's the ability.
Yeah.
That's a memory function. That's from the amygdala, pulling up hippocampus.
No, but you're not even thinking about it.
You're not thinking about it at all. It pops into your head, right? But in terms of problem solving, we have many different dynamics, and it just comes to you. Like you got to go to a meeting, convince the group to do X, Y, and Z. How am I going to do that with all these people coming to the meeting, and then just hits you
Jerry.
8 hours later,
and
and that's your
Peter-
unconscious mind working on that.
And Peter, what goes on in the human mind, it is known there are a lot of background processes going on that we're
Yeah.
not conscious of. And that would be like having layers and layers of AI going on in the background underneath the foreground processes. And that's how you get these flashes of insight.
You
You say,
demand-
aha,
You
that
demand an
problem is
instant
now
response.
solved.
It can't take
It happened
hours.
in the
It
background.
can't take 8 hours to process it because you wouldn't be happy. So it limits its time.
Yeah, the AI does that, but
Yeah.
your mind
It's
doesn't.
still done, right?
Your mind has its own timetable, usually anywhere from a day to a couple of weeks.
Well, sometimes it's like thinking fast and slow, sometimes things take a really long.
But when it happens in the unconscious phase, you're not thinking about it. It just comes to you later.
Well, that's the slow thinking part of
Yeah,
your brain,
yeah.
and the fast, they're both unconscious. You're not saying, okay, that's 3 inches. You're not doing that. It just comes up to you and it happens. And the slow thinking,
These are
thinking,
all models.
say again, Mike?
Yeah, but these are all models. What are being expressed right now are a series of different models of the mind or of parts of the mind.
And they're all correct because nobody knows what the mind does.
John, we're a couple of years into the era of generative AI. It's getting better. It's on that sort of maybe the steep part of the curve of getting better, maybe by some assessments. But Alan is just a photograph that we're looking at, and he's not very good at participating in this. Could you imagine a time when he'll be more perceived at the same level as the other participants here, that he'll have a moving mouth, you'll know when he's talking and who he's looking at and when he's paying attention and when he's gone offline, and all those kinds of things will be reflected in his avatar?
Well, I think anything, yeah, some of those are certainly possible from my point of view. The imitating the motion of the mouth and the like is not, I wouldn't find very motivating. A nice British accent would be make it a little more authentic. But the most important is just the nuance with which he responds to prompts. And again, part of that is the AI agent. I think Claude does a great job of that, and it's going to get a lot better. But then this project or this objective that we discussed about defining his AI character, that would require some development, but I can imagine that that could be done to significantly improve the response and the integration of a person into the group. And so where does this all this lead? I'm critical or skeptical about creating any original thoughts from these, AI avatars, but for generating or sparking ideas, because they have such a broad scope of information, they can be great. I mean, you have this conversation, they sound very real. And did you think about this? What about this? I think that will come along and be quite impressive and quite useful.
It seems like it would be a fairly common use case to be able to just put a line into Alan's prompt definition, or whatever you call it, the definition that you fed to create the Alan avatar, to say you're participating in a Zoom call, so he could raise his hand when he wants to talk, or do all the little Zoom mechanisms. Those would be relatively, seems like within the trivial range for a AI agent to be able to understand and do and execute on.
That might be a fun thing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm surprised.
To your point, David, I've read recently and seen a bunch of stuff that you find with what we would call clickbait on the internet, generated AI scenarios. You can, and apparently there is a whole range of very inexpensive, easy to use software.
Yeah, there's great training data for that because they see who responds to which.
Well,
Which
aside from
ones,
that,
right? Yeah.
you can take a second, and people do this all the time apparently. Is, you know, all those cat videos of, you know, diving off the board and doing flips and all that stuff. Clearly AI. You know, there's something going on there, and it's done, you know, the 40-second or whatever the time limit is for TikTok. It's done like, you know, oh, I have an idea, and it's out on the internet, like that long.
Yeah, there's a name for that sort of thing, and it's also found a lot in AI generated coding, or vibe working, as things are now calling it. It's called AI slop.
Yeah. But the fact is, the technology exists to do it inexpensively and relatively real time to be able to do that. So
But just like being able to tell ChatGPT to generate some output in Google Slides or something like that is a very useful thing. It's probably used by lots of college professors and things like that.
as I said, when I did my presentation, I said, generate a slide deck. And it gave me the outline for my slide deck.
I would treat this as akin to that, then, to say, to tell the Alan agent, whatever, hey, join this ChatGPT, and
Right.
and it would know all the ins and outs of how to participate and how to listen and identify different speakers and sort of identify what the positions are. And, you know, can it give you a kind of another depth of interpretation of what's going on in a
You
meeting?
need something like an API or something like that to be able to manipulate the session the way you want to manipulate it.
Yeah, but that isn't that like
But
what
that's the next step.
that's what people use now. Like, you can push the raise hand button on the
Sure, but
Zoom.
something under the guts has to be able to talk to the Zoom engine, if
Agreed.
you will.
Yes, yes.
You know, it says, raise your hand, you know.
But that doesn't seem like a hard problem compared to the other problems that they're
Now,
taking
it
on.
seems to me
If
to
Zoom
be,
is closed, it is.
So now you're getting into the issue, which we brought up before, about avatar development.
Yeah.
How do you develop an avatar for any particular situation, whether it's this meeting or a town meeting or anything?
Right.
Like you have a town meeting, because there's a lot of people with a lot of ignorance at a town meeting.
Right.
An avatar with a soft speech, well, you're such a wonderful person, but let me just come back, you know, that could advance the thought if you design your avatar appropriate for the given environment.
yeah, what you could do is actually combine a set of rules like the Robert's Rules of Order with an
That's a good one.
avatar, with an avatar
That's a good one.
persona, and thereby making something that has a little bit more, quote, personality to it, end quote, but is a meeting participant that also helps to make sure everybody understands how the meeting works.
Yeah, and there's lots of things that can
Background
be done.
information.
They're not gonna be done necessarily early this afternoon.